Alright, this project is going to be pretty fun. We're going to learn how to create a GIF and animate a still image. So let's get started. First thing we want to do is start a new project. Actually, I'm going to start by opening an image. I found an image that is a good resolution, and even though GIFs are generally speaking poor in resolution, I'm going to start off with the original image, and it can always be downsized from the original. And the other thing I want to do while I'm in here in the new project is I'm going to look at the image properties to see the canvas size. So the original image doesn't have a lot of room, and I eventually want this to be a square image. So I'm going to go ahead and match the width with the height. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to 2500. That's just going to stretch out my canvas, so I have a little bit more room to work with. And then the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and select my foreground. I found some success using this tool, the object selection tool. The way this works is you'll want to draw a rectangle around the foreground that you want to select. So I'm going to click and then drag out a window. And once I release, it's going to try to select the foreground. So it does a pretty good job. There's some things that were not selected, and then there's some other areas where the background was selected. So what I like to use to clean up a selection is the lasso tool. This is a freehand selection tool, so I'm going to be adding to my current selection. If you have it on replace, if I try to make a selection, it's just going to get rid of my initial selection. So I'm going to go ahead and go back a step. So I want to use it in the unite option there at the top. This will add it to the current selection. So I'm going to go ahead and draw around this section here. And then here around the tail, you can see there's some background that's there. So I want to go into the subtract option at the top. And then I'm going to be encircling the white background area to remove that. And then the shoes were completely missing in the selection, so I need to go back to Unite, and then carefully but somewhat quickly, for the sake of time, I'm going to select these shoes. And if I were doing this, and my daily result, I'd take some more time, but I'm going to try to do my best to do it quickly. Alright, almost done. Alright, so now we have our foreground selected. What we're going to be doing is applying what's called a puppet warp. And at this point in your project, you may want to just quickly create a mask which will hide the background. So we have anything that's white in the mask is revealed, anything that's black in the mask is hidden, and it looks as though we've successfully removed the background. I'm going to go ahead and select the icon for the layer and then go to Edit and apply the puppet warp option, and we'll see what happens. So even though the pixels are hidden, the white background is not in view, they are still there, they still exist, and the puppet warp applies this mesh over the entire image anywhere there are pixels. So even though they're hidden, it's not going to work. So we need to completely get rid of those pixels. So there's two ways to do that. Let me go ahead and go back a step. We'll get out of this mesh, and I'll undo the mask. So I'm back to my selection. So what I could do is invert the selection. So go up to select, inverse, which will select the background, and then I could press the backspace to delete. That's one way to remove the background completely. But if I want to keep my original, what I'm going to do instead of that, I have my foreground selected. I like to duplicate. And duplicate, I haven't found a way to do this easily and quickly without the shortcut, but it is a shortcut worth remembering. That is Control J. Control J is duplicate, and when you duplicate with a selection, it copies and pastes it into a transparent layer. So it's just like creating a blank layer, copying what you have selected, and then pasting it into a blank layer. It does all those steps with one shortcut. That's Control J for duplicate. So now we have these pixels in its own layer. I'm going to go ahead and hide the background. The only reason I did that is so I can retain the original image if I ever need to go back and for some reason I need to go back to the original. This original has all the pixels, and that's the background layer. So now I have a layer with just the pixels that are the image that I want to manipulate. And I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this one more time to compare two things. I'm going to go ahead and Control J, so now I have two different layers that are identical. I'm going to go ahead and hide the top layer for now and focus on this middle layer, the first copy that I made, and we're going to apply the Puppet Warp. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Edit and go to Puppet Warp. It applies the mesh to all the visible pixels. And the way this works is it kind of acts as a net, and it's kind of binding the pixels to each other. So when you start manipulating it, the groups of pixels move together. So one thing that you'll want to do first is determine what is the kind of movement that I want this object to do. How do I want to manipulate this? So usually you want just a part of it to change and the rest of it to remain the same. So the way this works is if you click in the mesh, it will place imaginary like poster board or cork board pins. So it's basically tacking it in place wherever you place a pin. So I want the torso to remain pretty still, and also the head. So I'm just going to go ahead and place one pin, and that will keep these things from wildly moving as I manipulate things. And then let's just start with one pin here that is going to control this movement here. So if I grab this pin and start to move it, it moves everything connected to it. So you can see how this is kind of like a puppet moving things around. And because I don't have pins around the perimeter of everything, you can see how the body slightly moves and the legs and the tail and the other arm. Everything's kind of moving in response to this one point moving around. So that's how the Puppet Warp works. I'm going to go ahead and just make one movement here so I can show the difference between this layer and the other duplicate that we had. I'm going to go ahead and click the check mark to accept that change. And then let's go ahead and reveal the layer that's on top. I'm going to repeat the same step, but this time I'm going to make this layer a smart object. Alright, so now I'm going to go through the same step, go to the Edit tool, find the Puppet Warp. It's going to apply the mesh, place a few pins here, and then I'm going to place a pin where we did on the previous layer, and then move this here. Click the check mark to accept that. Alright, so we have two layers that are pretty much the same. We went through the same steps. This layer, the smart layer, smart object, has this Puppet Warp applied as a smart filter. Smart filters are editable. So if I double click where it says Puppet Warp, I can go back in and change the settings for each of these pins. I can change, the movement, and I can basically edit what I did before. That's one benefit to using a smart object. The other, if I go into this layer here and I want to duplicate it, Control J, there's no way for me to, if I wanted to Puppet Warp it again, so I'm going to go back and do Edit, Puppet Warp. This was the duplicate of the first time we went through this. There are no pins that have been placed, so I have to remember where I place the pins. It's not always going to be in the same spot. So when I manipulate it again, it could have a different effect. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that. To contrast that, if I do the same thing into the smart object, I'll go ahead and duplicate the smart object. I can go into the puppet warp, and all my pins are there. In the previous layer, the ones that I placed, they're there. They're saved in this puppet warp that I duplicated. So then I can go on and further move it, continue a motion if I want to, take it to the next step, and then duplicate it again and go to another step. So it cuts down on my work and it makes everything more uniform as I'm creating motions. So using smart objects is a must in my opinion when you're using Puppet Warp. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these layers because I didn't do this with any intention. Oh, I already manipulated it. Sorry. Oh, I gotta go back so many steps. Bear with me here. I don't want to start this video over again. There we go. Let me go forward one step. Alright, here's the unmanipulated where we just duplicated what I had selected. So here's the foreground. I'm going to convert this to a smart object. Hopefully you're following along. So now we're ready to kind of imagine what kind of motion we want to do with our Puppet Warp. So what I want to do is kind of have one foot move out and the opposing arm on the other side move up. So I'm going to go ahead and go. So that's the first step, is kind of imagine what you want the thing to do with your Puppet Warp. So, and then you want to create some pins to hold some things in place. So let me go ahead. When you place a pin, it turns blue. That means it's selected. That's the pin that you're going to be affecting at the moment. If you select a pin, you can also delete it if you place too many. So with a pin selected, you could press delete or backspace and it gets rid of the pin. So that's the way you add and remove different control points on the image. So if you want the head to remain, entirely still, you could place tons of pins around it. I want there to be a little bit of motion with the head, so I'm going to leave it like that, and then just go down the center of the torso here to keep it in place. And I'm going to place a pin on all the different movement points in my image. I'm going to place one on the tail and hands and feet. I'm kind of not on the very edge. If you do it on the very edge, you can kind of stretch out just a little pointy area, which I don't want to do. So kind of inward of the outer boundary on the main part that you want to move. So hands, feet, and tail is what we got there. So I'm going to start first. What I want to do is duplicate this layer. So this is my starting point. So I want to Control J to duplicate. And let's go ahead and name these so it gets a little bit easier. Click where it has the name for the layer. And let's call this position 1. Or no, yeah, let's do this start. Now we're ready to go into the Puppet Warp and make our first movement. I didn't save the pins, oh no. Okay, let's go back in here and place these. Alright, now we're going to make our first movement. Alright, first I'm going to move this leg out. Let's just go, I'm going to go halfway. So this is actually going to be a 3-step movement. Let's say this is the midpoint. About right there. And then I want this arm, the opposing arm, to go up. And we're going halfway at this point. Kind of imagining the halfway point of the travel. And I'm going to move this arm in slightly. I'm going to click the check mark this time. Hopefully it will save all that information. And imagining that I am the baby in this scenario, and this is going to be left 1. I'll just do L1 for short. That's the left side, step 1. I'm going to duplicate this now. So this will be L2, the second step on the left. Let's go into the puppet warp. Got all my points there, and I'm moving this arm in towards the body. One more step there, moving the leg farther out. Right there, and then moving this arm up to its final position. Just going to be right there. Alright, so that is one motion. One thing I forgot to do, it's a very important step, is we are going to be creating a GIF, or GIF, whatever you want to pronounce it. So in order for the program to know that this layer is part of an animation, it has to be labeled a certain way. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this. And what you need at the beginning of the layer name is an underscore, the letter A, and then another underscore. That stands for animation, and all the layers that are going to be part of a sequence of an animation need to have the same layer label, so that underscore, A underscore. Add that to the next one, underscore, A underscore. That is the secret sauce here for the animating. So I'm going to go ahead and go into File. We're not done yet, but I want to show you what we're creating. So I'm going to export as a GIF. It takes a while to load. It's doing some processing in the background. And it's going to stitch together the all... Whoa, why are we zoomed in so far? Alright. Here we have our motion, and it's doing it in a loop. So it's going through the I only have 3 different layers, and then it's starting over. So 1, start, 1, 2, start, 1, 2, just running through them in order. Your quality, if you can handle it, should be 100%. Dither we won't even get into. It's how it processes different colors and the pixels, and it requires a lot of processing to change the settings, so I'm not even going to bother with that. Speed is how fast it goes through each step. The reverse frames is if you want it to play from the end back to the beginning, and the boomerang will go through and play it forward, then backward, then forward, then backward. So if you want to apply any of those, you could do that. And if I wanted to export it, I would just press save, and it would save as a GIF. As easy as that. But we're not done. So with that in mind, what I want to do is I'm going to step forward, and then I'm going to do 1 step back. So I'm going to go back to L1. So I'm going to go ahead and do Control J. So I move my hand, or my leg out, and I'm going to move it back into the middle position. So I can place that at the top. Come on. There we go. And then I'm going to go back to the start. So I'm going to duplicate start. So it's start, then move out halfway, then move completely out, then go back to the halfway point, and then back to start. Now that's one side, that's the left side. Now I'm going to do the right side. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate the start copy again, and go into the puppet warp. I think this is the one that only has 1 pin. So yeah, I need to go back through here and place the pins again. This time I'm going to move the tail with that side. Okay, so now we're moving the right foot halfway. The left arm halfway out and up. And then the right arm in towards the body halfway. Be careful here. That's halfway. So we're done there. I want to make sure I click the check mark. So I got that. Then duplicate it. So this is right. I'm going to go ahead and rename this. Make sure I keep the A or the underscore A underscore. So this is R1. Then I'm going to duplicate R1. Name this one R2. And then go into the puppet warp. And this time I go all the way. So I'm going to go ahead and move the right leg out all the way. I forgot to do the tail. The left arm up all the way. And then the right arm in. There we go. And then I'm going to move the tail this time all the way up where I want it to go eventually, and then I'll go back into the midpoint. This is why having a smart object is really key. Go ahead and click the check mark, and then I'll go into my R1. Oops, go into the puppet warp, and then make the tail halfway. Right there. I find having 3 stages of movement much better than 2. It just looks a lot more smooth, lifelike. Alright, so what I need to do now is click the check mark to accept that change. Duplicate R1, Control J, and this is going on top. This is my last step in the movement. So it's going through the movement and then back to the original. Hope that makes sense in the process there. So it's moving its start point, midpoint, out all the way, back to midpoint, back to the original, which is the starting point, and then it does the other side. And I'm ending with the midpoint strategically because I know it's going to loop back to the start. So I don't want to add another start at the end because I'll eventually have a start at the end and then a start at the bottom. I'll have 2 starts. So I want it to seamlessly loop. So now I have a nice animation. Let's go ahead and see what this looks like. Export as GIF. It's going to say my animation is too large. Is it okay to scale it down? Then I'm going to click OK, yes. There you see it. There's a nice animation. So I'm calling this a happy dance. So this would be great if this is what you're going for, but we're going to go take it to the next level. Alright, so the way this works is it's playing one image as one frame. So it's moving through the frames. So what if I wanted to add a background? I'm going to add a layer. Actually, I'll just select the background, add a layer right after that. This is a new blank layer. And I'm going to choose Edit, Fill, and I already chose a custom color. You could choose white if you wanted to. I'm going to choose a color, custom color. If you want to change it, click on the thumbnail there and choose color. Let's go ahead and do green. Okay. Then fill that layer with color. So here we have a background now. So you might be concerned if this was labeled with an A, it would play the background layer first, then it would go through all the other ones. So let's go ahead and do that. Do underscore A underscore. This is my blank layer, or my background layer. And then let's go back and export this as a GIF. So you can see the green layer is my first layer, And since it's labeled with an A as part of the animation, it plays the one frame with just the contents of that frame, and it moves on to the next layer. So that's not at all what we want to have happen. So let's see what happens if I remove the A, just leave it as a layer. We have a layer as a background for our animation, which is great. This is exactly what we want to have happen. What if I wanted to add text? So right now, anything that is not part of the animation shows just like an image would. So it just stays on. It's always on. So if I wanted to add text, I could add it anywhere in my layers, and if it's not part of the animation, it will just stay on. So let me just go ahead and add a text layer. And let's just type something here. Happy. Yes. Let me just go ahead and increase the size a little bit. And then we transform a little bit. Let's go ahead and show the transform controls. Move it. Rotate a little bit. Alright, so now I can go in and export as a GIF. So that looks much nicer. We're going to take it even further than that. We're going to take it to the even next level. Let's say we wanted this to change over time. We want the background to change color. Maybe we want the text to move around or change color. Let's just do a simple color change because for sake of time, let's not get too detailed. So let's just say we simply want the background to change, not with every frame, that would be a little bit much, but let's just say it changes twice. In order for this to work, what you have to do is create a background layer and a text layer and merge them with the foreground, so your moving object. So you have to combine them somehow. So we're going to choose to do that with a smart object. So I'm going to combine the smart object. So this would be after the animation's totally complete. Now you're just adding, because basically these are just still images at this point. You're not going to be editing them anymore. So what you're going to be doing is merging them with text and a background. So let's go ahead and say we want to merge. I'm going to go ahead and copy these, merge these two layers. I'm going to select the background and the text and make them their own smart object in one smart object layer. So I'm going to combine that. Let's just say we do the first set of movements with this green background. So what I want to do is add this to each of these steps. So I need to have 3 copies. So I'm going to go ahead and do Control J and Control J again. So I have 3 of them. So I'm going to merge this first one by holding the Shift key down and selecting both layers, and then convert to a smart object. Just mind here. Did it work? There we go. So now the start has a green background. You can see they've been merged together. See the difference? So for the next one, I'm going to select the layer with the foreground on it, and instead of holding Shift, I'm going to hold Control down because they're not attached, they're not touching each other. So hold Control and then find the copy of the background, and the same thing, right click or 2-finger tap, convert to smart object. It's going to blend the two together. Same with you. Control E, right click, 2-finger tap, convert to smart object. Oh, I want to Control Z. I need to retain 1 copy, so I need to duplicate this one more time. I'm going to combine that with this one. You'll see in a minute why. As soon as we're done. Oh, not enough RAM. I've run out of RAM. Let's see what we can do about that. Alright, so I need to edit my image size. Let me see if I can do that without destroying anything. So let's go ahead and take this down to half. 1250? 12. Yeah, 50. There we go. Hopefully this is going to work. Oh, great. Okay, so we have resized it down. We should have enough RAM to finish this off. So I'm combining these two layers. Into a smart object. And then I need to duplicate this. So this is the midpoint again, copy. And then let's go ahead and convert to a smart object. There we go. So now I still have this original, which has the background layer and the text layer on it. It's a smart object. I'm going to go in and change the color for the second half of the GIF. So I'm going to double click that, and then basically a smart object is a project within a project. So now I'm in that layer as a separate project. And what I'm going to do is change the color of the layer and the color of the text. So let me go first and grab the font tool, double click the text layer, and change the font to, let's go ahead and do white since it was black before. Okay. We deselect it to make sure that applied. And now we're going to change the background color. So let me select that layer and then do edit, fill, change the color. Let's do in the red family, something like that, purple. Click OK. And then to save, what you want to do is click File, Save Smart Object. So it's basically saving the project within a project. Now that it's saved, the asterisk is gone, so you can safely just close out of that layer. And now it should be updated. Let me go scroll down. This is our new background layer. I'm going to go ahead and just move this up so it's easier to find. Come on. There we go. So now we're starting the second half of the animations. And so I have 1, 2, 3, 4 layers, so I need 4 different backgrounds. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate those real quick. And then start merging them together. So 1. I still don't have enough RAM. I'm going to have to reduce the size again. 800 by 800. That will for sure work. Which is a default size for something I can't remember. Alright, we should have plenty of RAM now. So we're combining these into a smart object. And then one last layer. Alright, so I make sure all of them are labeled for animation. And just one more thing, if it's hidden, it just ignores it. So this will not be included in the sequence of animation. It will not affect my image whatsoever. Alright, so now I'm ready to view the final product. Let's go ahead and go to File, Export as a GIF.